Hey, how's it going, everyone? Just want to do another lesson. I'm going to talk about the 24 elders that are referenced in the book of Revelation in chapter 4. And just slightly for comedy, obviously, anything related to the Bible usually is very, very serious. But just for, I guess, hyperbole and for teaching, Pastor Steven Anderson, who I've been picking on a little bit lately, makes a statement regarding these 24 elders that first he then replaces them, their description from elder to pastor to modernize it for whatever reason. He wants to describe them as pastors. And conveniently, he's a pastor, according to his own designation. He's Pastor Steven Anderson. So these elders are now pastors, and they're sort of the elite pastors. This is his breakdown of who these 24 elders are, that are in the presence of God. They are the 24 men that are literally closest to God physically in or the spiritual realm, God's presence. And so he describes them as pastors and says they are the sort of cream of the crop pastors throughout human history, which right away is ridiculous. But we'll sort of entertain his breakdown. And then he goes on to say that he would never put himself in that position, but he would aspire to that. He would think, he was saying that pastors should aspire to be in that close group, closest to Jesus Christ. So there would be the Most High, the highest spirit. He will always be the supreme. He will always be at the quote top. And then we have Jesus Christ, who's the highest spirit, on the right-hand side. And then the Bible states that there are 24 elders that are closest to Jesus. And then there's 144,000 who are also all men. And then they are the next, quote, in line. And then there's hopefully us, I guess, the rest of us who believe that we're on the right-hand side and doing the works of those consistent, with those who are on the right-hand side. And so, two of those seats are already filled and will never change. The Most High in Jesus Christ, that is what it is. And thankfully, that's the case. There's no debate about the hierarchy there. And Jesus is very subservient, always, in everything that he said, every breath that he took. He honored his, position beneath the Most High. And what an amazing place. Obviously, that is not given to anybody, just willy-nilly. He walked the walk and talked the talk, as we've seen by his example on earth, through the account in the Bible and through the Spirit that, he speaks to his people. And he's an incredible entity. And so if he's incredible, how much more incredible would be the Spirit that created him, the Most High. It's an amazing thing. And so there are hierarchies on the right-hand side, just like there are hierarchies on the left-hand side, all these Rothschilds and all the people that are above them. And then ultimately the spiritual demon Satan is the highest spirit, quote unquote, highest spirit on the left-hand side. And there's structure on the right. And the book of Revelation and really many, many places in the Bible reaffirm that is true. And it makes sense. If the left-hand side is coordinated and organized, how much more would the right-hand side be organized and have a hierarchy? And so Pastor Steven Anderson, who is, wants to be the head of the class, shooting his shot, in the spiritual sense. It's comedy. I'm bringing this out as a form of teaching, but for me, largely it's comedy. Because he's a ball earther, which is insane to think that, and this is why I struggle with sort of understanding a lot of the Hebrews and what they're up to. They keep saying, what does the shape of the earth matter when it comes to salvation and the elect and stuff? I'm like, it's hard for me to believe that. I'm not saying that they can't be on the right-hand side, and because God can teach people things, quickly, and it's not that big of a deal for God to teach truths, to anybody. The Bible even says the Spirit quickens. The Spirit is quick. When we, again, people who think that they're on the right-hand side are striving. When we hear truth, when we see things, we know that, that's God. It doesn't take us that long for a lot of things to know that God is behind it and teaching us something that reflects his character, the things that he likes. And so, I'm not saying it's a difficult thing to take somebody out of Ball Earth, but, it's important. We're talking about a relatively small group of men and in God's circle, so close quarters. And so we would think that they would know what the shape is. Obviously I believe that it's flat and not moving at all in any direction. So one would think that, obviously the Most High and Jesus know what they made because they made it. And, the 24 elders would be flat earthers. And then I think that at some way, somehow the 144,000, whether they're told, in the last moments or however, they know that the earth is flat. In the very least, if they're raptured, they'll just look down, and be like, okay, yeah, whatever, I screwed up. So, it's better to learn those things now. And I'm very thankful for that gift for sure, even though it's sometimes difficult to deal with on the day-to-day, because again, so many people, even within the church, believe that we're on a ball. But that's not the point of this lesson. I just highlight the fact that they're all truthers, to the highest degree. And the Bible even says the 144,000 are not allowed to have any guile in their mouth. They're not allowed to lie. And so one would think that the entities above them, the 24 elders, would be that and more. They are the literal cream of the crop. I would suspect that one of them is John the Baptist, or Elijah. If you have an ear to hear, they're the same spirit. That's for sure, because Jesus says of those born among men, he is the greatest. And so he's got a seat. He's like, pick whichever of the 24 seats you want. That's for you. And so there's an interaction that I want to use also to prove that Steven Anderson is not just Ball Earth, which is obvious. Ball Earth, to me, you're not even allowed in the building, at this level, at this high level on the right-hand side. You're not even, to me, God is mocking people who push Ball Earth with any kind of fervor and seriousness. And so he's mocking Steven Anderson. So again, this lesson is slightly comedic, but also just to get a point across. But in Matthew 20, verses 20 to 28, it reads, "Then came to him the mother of Zebedee, children with their sons, worshiping him and desiring a certain thing of him. And he said unto her, What wilt thou? She saith unto him, Grant that these my two sons may sit on thy right hand and the other on the left in thy kingdom." So they're asking for one of those 24 seats. She's asking on their behalf. Jesus answered and said, "Ye know not what ye ask. Are you able to drink of the cup that I shall drink of, and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with? They say unto him, We are able. And he said unto him, Ye shall drink indeed of my cup, and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with. But to sit on my right hand and on my left is not mine to give, but it shall be given to them who it is prepared of my Father." The Most High controls absolutely everything. Every breath that a person takes is ordained by God, all of us, whether we're on the left or the right-hand side. And when the 10 heard it, they were moved with indignation against the two brethren. They felt like they were kind of going behind their back, asking for an exalted position. So we can see that they're very much human, even though they're very close to God. But Jesus called them unto him and said, "Ye know that the princes of Gentiles exercise dominion over them." He's prophesying the enslavement that will happen in his time and will continue to happen to this day. That form of dominion and enslavement is satanic over them, and they that are great exercise authority upon them. This is where the vibe, the spirit of the Bible, of the God of the Bible, is not to enslave and to have dominion. That is what man is doing, even though God is overseeing it and allowing it. But this is not the spirit of Jesus Christ, and all these quote unquote leaders who want people to praise and worship and financially and otherwise emotionally support them. That is Antichrist. And Jesus is saying that here in verse 25. That's what the Gentiles do, to exercise dominion over others. Verse 26 says, "But it shall not be so among you." These are the people that are closest to him. He still has to remind them this. "But whosoever will be great among you, let him be your minister. And whosoever will be chief among you, let him be your servant, even as the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister and to give his life as a ransom for many. God is only capable of serving. That's all he can do. He can't take. Everything is his. So for people to mimic the God of the Bible, the best at the highest level, they have to serve. They have to forgive those who are evil and those who persecute them. These are the highest, most supreme ethics that align people with the Bible, the God of the Bible, immediately. And that's an amazing thing, and God, Jesus is humble and he did not commit any sin. So people who are closest to him know that they have to be more inclined, very, very inclined to humility because they're sinners. And so there are certain ethics, there are certain things that align people to the closest to the God of the Bible the most, and servanthood is one of them, because God is, like I said, only able to serve. And so Jesus is redefining people's mentality for how the Most High, what the Most High would be looking for, or program people to do to be in that close group of the 24. And so he's not saying that they're not going to be there. He's using this moment to teach. But I do find it also kind of interesting that their mom is asking on their behalf. And so it's like they don't even have the ability to just go and ask themselves. And I'm not throwing them under the bus, but it's just something for us to learn. Like, this would be something you just ask God, like, God, what would it take to be somebody that is on your left hand or right hand side? And then another valid question that God would probably have said, maybe off the record, is like, why do you want to be close to him? Like, if we put ourselves in that position, and we have people that come to us and say, like they're drawn to us for whatever reason, and they say, I want to be on your left and right hand side, we would wonder why. We would evaluate, this is just from a human perspective, why do people want to be close to us? We examine this in all of our relationships in an earthly sense. Jesus is not dumb. He's not like stupid. Like, he's not just getting hoodwinked and flattered here and just like, oh, wow, great, you guys want to hang out with me? No, he's going to wonder, like, why do you guys want to be that close to me? Like, what is the reason for it? And he's saying, if you do want that, you're going to have to get ready to drink of this cup. Like, it's not for free to just come and hang out with me. That's why majority of Christianity in the world right now is completely satanic. They have no idea what it is. They think that it's just saying a sinner's prayer and just preaching from the pulpit and having people think that you're smart and logical and make insightful points. That's insane. There's nothing about the Bible that reiterates or supports that just being articulate and getting people to laugh and say you're smart will get any kind of credibility with God. Jesus reminds us, all of us here, at two major points. First, suffering is going to be required, and it's going to happen. He basically tells them, you're going to go through the same pain that I have, whether you like it or not. And servanthood, and actually serving people. And the Bible even says that you have to even serve your enemies. And no one does that. Like, just to be totally honest, I haven't seen that anywhere. And it's not a shot to anybody really at all. It's just a fact, in the world that we live in. And it's not common even in his time. These are people that are walking right next to the God of the universe, and they're still having to be reminded and taught these things. So it's just not common, and that's okay. I'm not saying we should complain or be disappointed. That's more and more room for us, all of us collectively, to worship God, because he did that. He's perfect and he's humble, and he loved and served his enemies. Judas was his enemy, and he was still, was cordial, and he still treated him with a certain amount of respect. And then all those that crucified him, he asked with his last breath of the Father, forgive them, because they don't know what they're doing. They were dealing with a very, very different entity here. And his mental math, his economy, his understanding of the way the Most High measures and judges things is very, very different than the world. And Steven Anderson's not even allowed in the building. He to me is Antichrist. He is mocking the poor, which God loves. How can Steven Anderson walk hand in hand, side by side with Jesus, when Steven Anderson hates the poor, but Jesus made the poor and loves them? So you cannot walk hand in hand with somebody who thinks one thing completely opposite to what another person thinks. And Jesus made the flat Earth, knows it's flat, and Steven Anderson's a ball earther. And so this is like, obviously for many of us, it's exaggeration. Like Steven Anderson, I mean, is Satan, is the Antichrist, one of the many Antichrists. But just for the sake of sort of, illustration and for effect. And Tahar is the same way at GMS. It's talking about Apostle Paul and the reincarnation, an entity that one would think would be, quote, in the running for one of those 24 seats. Come on, he's a ball earther. He talks about, if you're struggling with women or you just want to get it over with, just go get a prostitute. This is the world that we live in. We have quote unquote truthers who are Antichrist, who are Satan, and they have a following. Tahar's channel, I believe it's called What is the Mark 666 or something like that, and Steven Anderson has, let's see, 120 some thousand followers on YouTube and a church called Faithful Word Baptist. They have a following, they have some clout, and they think that they're close to God, when it's obvious that they're Antichrist. And so this is just the world that we live in. And so people who say that we're not in the end times, we're nowhere close, to me are completely lost, because how much worse can it get? I mean, there's literally nobody who who's speaking truth. It's just the church is completely sold out. Everybody knows that, the mainstream church, the Catholic Church, and all that. And the people who are into some conspiracies, at least, are totally lost. They're just completely evil, and they don't understand the very, very basics of Jesus's message. And so that was Matthew 20. And then so again reiterated in Matthew 23:11-15, but he that is greatest among you shall be your servant. So what can we infer of those 24 elders? They're the most servant-minded people, entities that have ever touched earth. That is John the Baptist. John the Baptist was there to serve Jesus Christ and be the prepare the way, for Jesus. And obviously he's done work in past lives as Elijah. And so he's trusted. He is he's not in this for any other reason, but for whatever Jesus Christ's agenda is. That's what John the Baptist is all about. And he just is being put in different, quote, roles, bodies, inhabiting different bodies, but doing the same thing, speaking the words of God and serving his purposes alone. That's it. He doesn't want anything else besides that. And that's the candidate for being one of the 24. Not preaching ball earth and mocking the poor, which Steven Anderson does. And Steven Anderson will not even acknowledge that Jesus is black, which we know now. And so he's completely lost. Again, I just mention that not to give him any kind of attention unnecessarily, but just for further evidence that American Christianity is just a complete joke. Christianity worldwide is a joke. Okay, so Matthew 23:11-15 reads, but he that is greatest among you shall be your servant, and whosoever shall exalt himself shall be abased, and he that humbleth himself shall be exalted. But woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye shut up the kingdom of heaven against men, for ye neither go in yourselves, neither suffer ye that are entering to go in. Ball earth closes the door for people. It's an atheist doctrine. So people who are pushing that with fervor are in the very least constipating other people's access to God, and that will be dealt with. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye devour widows' houses, and for a pretense make long prayers. Therefore ye shall receive the greater damnation. If anybody is not speaking out against this government system as a religious leader, widows, the poor, everybody's being devastated by this financial system. Steven Anderson is completely satanic, and God has no correlation with the things that are coming out of his mouth. He's not even allowed in the building, like I said. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye compass sea and land to make one proselyte, and when he is made, ye make him twofold more a child of hell than yourselves. So anybody who goes to Steven Anderson and thinks that, seduced by his word just because of his rhetoric, they're going to be attracting more and more spirits. It's like a spirit then would, spirits are kind of, to me, tuned and programmed to be attracted to certain things. So people who are kind of neutral and blasé just kind of go through life, and like they have some, attraction towards and affinity towards evil spirits. But people who are very passionate and bold about the truth when they're actually lies and evil, there'd be more and more spirits, in my opinion, drawn to that. And evil spirits would not want to be anywhere around people who are fasting, praying, being charitable, being honest, all that type of stuff, just in a broken state. None of that, they would resist that, or people who speak the Bible and all that kind of stuff. Like, that's fundamentally any truth. Evil spirits would not be drawn to that. And so evil spirits are drawn to Faithful Word Baptist Church because people think that he's telling the truth, and he's packaged a couple of truths, like America being Mystery Babylon, and pushed it out there, and has now exalted himself as being a candidate for 24 pastors when it's elders. Elder is used for a purpose. It's not an earthly thing. It's not an earthly seat. It's certainly not a designation that American Christianity uses, because American Christianity is completely satanic. Like I said, John 3:12, if I have told you earthly things and ye believe not, how shall ye believe if I tell you heavenly things? These people don't even know the shape of the earth. Then they want to be the Apostle Paul and John the Revelator and know more about John the Revelator and all that kind of stuff. John the Revelator knew what the earth looked like when he was in the spirit. He just knew that. Like, people knew that in the past. It was common knowledge for anybody with common sense, that we're not spinning, and that God created the sun and the moon within the firmament, and there was an entity outside of that, that's overseeing it. So Jesus is saying here in John 3 verse 12, if I have told you earthly things and ye believe not, how shall ye believe if I tell you of heavenly things? Pastor Steven Anderson is a baller, mocks the poor, doesn't know that Jesus is black, teaches America's Mystery Babylon, but still thinks that America is going to destroy Islam in the Middle East. These people are out of their mind. I have no idea. I don't know what to say. It's just absurd now, the world that we live in. So, the truth is hidden in very much pockets on earth. And, we have to dig somewhat to find it, but it's becoming more and more obvious that these people are just completely evil, who are claiming to be close to God. Like to me, the only likely candidates on earth right now, who are potentially of the 24, we would have to believe that the 144,000 are on the earth. And I believe, if people are able to hear it, that they're likely sealed. I can't imagine one of them not knowing what's going on at this point. But again, that's only if we're in the end times. If we're not, they could be born into new, bodies in the future, or the Bible cannot be true. But to me, it's pretty safe to say that the 144,000 know, that the earth is flat and America's Babylon and all these kind of things are being done according to God's will. So, I think that these things, to me, it's just becoming sort of obvious that, that these people are completely lost. But the thing I wanted to say about the 24 elders, and possibly a great deal potentially of the 144,000, is that they're likely very, very poor, and I don't know this, this is just my opinion, because I don't think people can function in this society, in the quote unquote corporate world, or in any kind of job, because of how it requires you to lie. And so this is where I think that the poor, it's not just symbolic that God's like, he's hidden his spirit in the poor. It's literal in some cases, that God's spirit literally is in the poor, because that's the only quote unquote righteous place that God's soul can dwell, God's spirit can dwell, because they're still in the system, but they're technically out of it. They've been rejected for whatever reason. Again, God makes the poor. And so I suspect that if there is one of these 24 elders on earth right now, which there may not be, but let's just say kind of hypothetically, to me, it's very likely that they're poor, and very, very poor. And Jesus even says that he has no place to rest his head. So the people that are close to him, it would be the same, I would suspect. And I have a feeling many of the 144,000 are the same. So it will be a sight for a lot of people if this rapture happens in our lifetime and we get to witness it, that that the poor will be taken away, and some of them would be so-called Negroes. That would be a sight, because both things would go contrary to the way that we're programmed to think in this day, that God doesn't care about the poor, because look at them, no one cares, and God has turned his back on the condition of the so-called Negroes in America, which I believe many are the biblical Jews. So, you know, that's I just kind of put this out there just sort of, I guess, for somewhat comedy. I'll append the clip of Steven Anderson after this talking about the 24 pastors, conveniently renamed to pastors. You know, it's like it's like he gets a job application, he starts scratching out all the terms, like, oh no, it says elder here, but you know, it's like I've been a pastor already, so I'm just going to kind of scratch that out and, you know, make that into a pastor instead of an elder. We're not allowed to take away from the words of the book, and he's going to be dealt with for a lot of different reasons, but you know, he's completely out of his mind. You know, just his breakdown of Revelation at this point is comedy. To me, there is going to be technically a pre-tribulation rapture and a post-tribulation. There's a pre-tribulation one where God's elect are taken away, the people that know what's going on and realize that this ecosystem is completely evil and they're required to sin, so they're just taken away, or else they just kill themselves, because that's the only righteous thing to do. When Jesus says that it's better to cut your arm off than sin, some people believe that, you know, and I believe that the 144,000 literally believe that. And people who believe that they're God's children, we negotiate with God with our life, because we don't value anything really that's going on in this world, especially one right now that's completely evil. And so they'll take that literally, you know, and then they'll say, like, look, if I'm required, we're all required to lie, and that's obvious, then it's better to die, you know. And the funny thing about Steven Anderson's video, I'll put the link to the full one, he talks about how Apostle Paul talks about how it's better to be with God than to be here. It's better to die, to be in the spirit with Jesus, than to be here. And that's obvious, you know, to people who are spiritual. And so it's not a big deal, you know. People make dying a big deal here because we're in a beast system, and the system wants everybody to continue to be enslaved, to support it, because that's what Satan wants. That's his objective. He wants lots of followers, lots of people, big numbers, all that kind of stuff. But if people start giving up, and people have been doing it for a while now, you know, the system will crumble. And so to me, that's the purpose of this quote unquote pre-tribulation rapture. Even though we're in tribulation now, I think it's disrespectful to even call the stuff that's going on now not tribulation when it is. So there's technically tribulation. To me, it's just before big tribulation. Real tribulation happens worldwide, and the mark of the beast is implemented. And then there's the Revelation talks about another group that go through tribulation, but refuse the mark of the beast and are given white robes. So he doesn't even know that basic understanding, and he believes in a post-tribulation rapture, which again makes sense, because a lot of these people, these baller prophets especially, want people to go through tribulation. Even like flat earth Bible literalists, I suspect she's a quote unquote post-tribber. They're baiting people into chaos, you know, and wrath, and who knows what will happen when the mark of the beast comes out, if they'll take it or they'll make up some story about how it's not that bad, or whatever. We have no idea if these people will switch teams. And so to me, they're just baiting people into really more and more sin, because people, like I said, we're all required to sin to stay alive here. And many people, not even religious people, are complaining, you know, that is the case. And people don't like it. You know, it's just what it is. Even if there were no Bible or quote unquote end times, people don't like having to lie and act to stay alive, much less people who are religious, much less people who are the 144,000, much less people who are the 24 elders, if they're on the earth right now. They don't compromise, you know, and thankfully there are spirits like that out there, because they're few and far between. Hope everyone's doing well. Bye.